Welcome back. Still tuned in to Salam Media with myself, Salailo Makwidir. The time is 8:41. And in a bit, we'll be joined by a former member of the anti-apartheid sports movement and he's currently with the SAPDS coalition, Hassan Lorkat. And we'll be speaking about the hashtag Red Card Israel campaign. This is a campaign that is calling for football authorities, FIFA and the South African Football Association, to expel Israel from world football, and for South Africa to also cut ties with the Israeli apartheid genocidal regime in all spheres, not just politically and, socially, but also when it comes to issues of sport. And Hassan Lorca is joining us via StreamYard. Good morning, Mr. Lorca. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Salailo. Thank you for having me.
I think, first and foremost, let's start with context. I think for the younger generation, it's so difficult to imagine just the power that, boycotting things like, sports for a particular country, what kind of impact it can have, because we didn't see in real time when South Africa itself, during the dark days of apartheid, was expelled by, world sports federations like the Olympics and FIFA, and we couldn't participate. If you can just give context about just how powerful, expelling a country in sports and arts and culture activities globally that can have on, some of their human rights infringements, like what we are seeing currently with the Israeli apartheid regime.
Yeah. Salala, one of the things that I think in part we're talking about is the new ministry of Sports, Arts and Culture led by Gayton McKenzie, who is a known xenophobe, anti-Palestinian person. And this is a mark of concern for many of us. I also want to say that what we need to do, Salailo, we need to be careful that we don't only talk about sport, although, of course, you're here to talk about our red card campaign. I would like to see this new minister pick up a book, read about our history, read about Sarah Bartman, how she was taken away from the shores here, and Diana Ferris, the poet, wrote so aptly about it that I've come to take you home. She was taken to freak shows in Europe, and she died really a miserable death in 1815. So, we need to talk about culture, we need to talk about sport, but culture is the one that heals us, puts words and emotions to us so that we can build the solidarity. So this minister has to start thinking more than simply just about how he can get quick victories through supporting the spinning of cars or that as a sport or stuff like that. We need to really talk about how we can heal the society. And interestingly, as we just speak, and I'm forced to raise this with you, that the minister has been accused and charged by some of the anti-xenophobic groups, solidarity groups, about his xenophobic comments made recently during the election campaign. So it's important that we put this holistically together, because sports is a part of healing, is a part of nation building, is a part of solidarity, as much as culture is. But if sport is only going to be eating the money of all the of the budget allocated for this department, then I think we're failing our people. So us in the Palestine Solidarity Association, a member of the BDS, we've been very, very committed to try and see how the two wings of this department can talk to each other. We need to talk about the poetry, as I said, of Diana Ferris, Wally Serote, various other people, Abdullah Don Matera, and various people like that. And Matera himself was a gangster who saw the good path, and we hope that this gangster can embrace other people and not just hate people. So this department has its work cut out for itself. So part of our red card campaign is the idea about isolating Israel from world sport. You said earlier, Salailo, that many of the younger generations don't really know what it took, to get apartheid kicked out. That is so true. But they do know that Russia was kicked out in a jiffy, just like that. When Russia, when Putin decided that he's going to invade invade Ukraine. And his motive, of course, he said was to promote peace, etc., etc. But it took them, very, very quick. In a jiffy, they had kicked out Russia from sport. The sports people who participate in there can only do that as individuals, and some of them have the onerous mandate of having to denounce their own governments, as a basis of participation. Now, the killings, and not that any killings should be justified in Ukraine, but the killings are not as live and not as numerous as what we are seeing in Gaza and the West Bank. Yet the international bodies take their own time. Now, this has been the case with South Africa as well. So part of our international campaign is to make sure that we understand these institutions. We saw with the International Court of Justice, right, how a southern government led by the ANC took the role of challenging these courts, because these courts were used at the whims and fancies of the powerful, always to attack the poor. The ICC, as Qasim Khan himself pointed out, that was seen as always either going for the renegades in Europe, like Putin, or only to prosecute third world leaders. So really, really, what we are fighting against here is a systemic change. How to change the global systems of governance, the multilateral systems that must work for everybody and not just the powerful. So our red card campaign is really meant to show focus that there's duplicity at an international level, that some people's victims are more deserving than the others, and that must come to an end. Israel has killed over 37,000 people, maimed hundreds more, and people are living in starvation. The number of Palestinians disabled, handicapped by Israel, shot deliberately to make them disabled, it runs into the hundreds. And what is interesting is that some of these young people and slightly more mature have formed teams to play as disabled athletes. They're not disabled because they got hurt in a game. They were killed, they were disabled by snipers. So for us, our sports campaign, for example, at the PSA, is very, very much concerned about the minister focusing on school facilities here for black kids, Indian, colored, and African schools, historically disempowered and marginalized by apartheid. 30 years later, the challenge remains that we go to a school in any part of Lenasia or Elders, you won't find a school having a swimming pool. Go anywhere in the north, in Ejozi, you will find a hall, a multi-purpose center, kids playing sport until 10 o'clock at night, right? So we need to go back to this idea. And our coordinator, him and his wife run a sports club, Atlantis, which are associates of our of Palestine Solidarity Alliance. They're very, very committed to the idea of turning around the fact that so many South Africans die every year. In fact, it's 1,500, the figure was pointed out, because they do not know how to save themselves, how to swim. So this department, with the education department and others, must also be interested in making sure that people learn to swim, right? You can't have people dying simply because they don't know how to swim. So, Laila, I don't know about your school, and you're clearly younger than me, but I don't know if they teach you guys to swim.
Well, yeah, I can swim, fortunately, and
But did the school teach you? Did the school
it
teach you?
was
That's
school.
the issue.
Yes, yes, yes. It was school. I
Yeah,
think I was privileged to go to the former Model C schools. But
that's right.
how would you answer someone who would say, we've seen the campaign at the International Court of Justice. We've seen numerous calls by the United Nations and various other bodies the world over, calling for the boycott of Israel and calling for the state of Israel to be held accountable for all of the atrocities that they committed in Palestine, and that has not yielded any kind of solid results. what's a campaign like the hashtag Red Card for Israel going to do? What's Israel not playing in the World Cup or not participating in the Olympics? Can it do when this regime is so arrogant and continues, to perform its atrocities with such impunity? What does them not playing in the Olympics going to do for the people of Palestine? As you mentioned, are enduring a mass, genocide and all of these human-induced humanitarian crisis by the state of Israel.
I mean, what we can say we are better off the last few years, especially with South Africa's leadership role at the ICJ, activists on the ground playing a role. In fact, in Scotland, when Israel played there, protesters occupied the place and they wanted to stop the Scottish teams from playing against Israel. So everywhere else, there are no-go zones where people are saying to them that there's a genocide going on and that you should not be playing with those who kill other people. Now, our problem is not the people of Europe. It's the leadership of these bodies that are largely occupied by Europeans and North Americans and those who would do their bidding for them. So if you look at the South African example, he took the South African Council of Sport, working with the South African Non-Racial Olympic Committee, SANROC, Dennis Brutus and such like, Sam Ramsam and others, many decades to organize from the 50s onwards. And it seemed that the only successes came when we convinced other governments, right? And in 1968 games, there was a lot of pressure, and South Africa was not allowed. In fact, what they did, they organized its own apartheid games here, where Xhosas were playing isiZulu speaking people, and Coloureds were playing Indians, and what they had that kind of mockery. So we need to go back to that idea, and we seem like we're making great progress with Irish and South Africa, New Zealand. Activists are very, very strong, trying to put pressure on their governments, because this Olympic sports, FIFA and others, I have national representations. And what we need to do is to get those bodies, those countries, to put pressure on them. It's only when Africans said that we will not be going to the Olympics, we will not be playing here, that they realize, God, a whole continent, will not be with us. And the top athletes in the world really are in long distance and various other places are from Africa. So we need to put that kind of pressure. The conscience in Europe was really good. The Dutch were really good. We are struggling, but we have made greater progress now. So I'm saying to you, we're trying to change people and institutions. At present, their grip on the institutions is very minimal. But when we have a red card campaign, we have to make sure there are no-go zones for Israel to play. It's not just in South Africa where they can't play. They shouldn't be playing anywhere in Europe. And everywhere they go, there are protests. Even the women's football recently in Europe, it was unprecedented, the number of open letters and protests that they experienced. So we need to keep organizing. But I think at the end of the day, our real organizing takes place at home. We must put pressure on our authorities here to take the lead, right? And I know what happens with a minister like the one we have. Is going to resist every possible move that we support the struggles of other people. In fact, I think that the minister must realize sport is about international solidarity, but we don't play with those who kill other people, right? It's close to 38,000 people killed by the Israeli occupying forces. So that's our simple message, but we need to make sure that at home we demand that more women play sport. We must demand the right to play for poor people and working class people, right? So this is part of the agenda, that it's not just going to be about boycotting, getting Israel kicked out. For us, and we've got a unit, a working group around sport there, who wants to make sure that there's a right to play for poor people. There's a chance for them to earn. There's a chance for them to recreate. But there's some people, Slalo, who actually believe that the idea that, as Russell pointed out in 1915, this is the philosopher Bertrand Russell, in his essay, The Praise of Idleness, he says the idea that the poor should have leisure has always been shocking to the rich, because they always thought that the poor must labor. So what I'm saying to you, for us, we're not just coming through the boycott. and the isolation of Israel is one. But we need to build the popular movement by taking up their real issues on the ground, making sure that there's a right to leisure, that our schools have good facilities, and you're right, that Model C schools have the infrastructure and they actually develop people that are questioning and that, but the schools of the working people look like they just prepared for the pools of unemployment, not swimming pools where people can recreate, So clearly we need to really rethink the situation. And this minister has his work cut out for him as we have our work cut out for us. But he must realize that it's art and culture and sport, and that this is about healing from the past, healing the wounds of how Sarah Bartman was treated, and listening to the poetry of Diana Ferris and the others when she said, "It's time to take you home," right? It means basically that it's a time for closure and that this guy cannot have it easy. We must make it tough for him, but we must also be constructive. If he claims he loves the poorest so much, he must make sure that every school has a sports facility, a hall, multi-purpose hall, where basketball, netball, all those things can be played, a swimming pool, right? And that's one part of the local pressure where the popular movement can be built by taking up the real issues affecting these communities. If you go to Eldos, very, very marginalized, right? For years, we know in the anti-apartheid movement, Soweto that had 2 million people had one swimming pool or two. And then they tell you afterwards that black people can't swim. Or why are people dying? Because we're not trained, We have the right to recreate, but we also need for quality facilities. And that was the movement. We wanted quality facilities for all people so that our full human potential can be realized. But that means also that we are in solidarity with those who are being shot. Simply, their football fields are bombed up. Universities, schools are killed. I mean, it is just a nightmare what Israel is trying to do. But it starts off with our compassion and our history. That is why we stand with Palestine. We're not just picking it out of the head. We can see the symbolism, but that is on steroids. It is something we've never seen in our lives, nor have you.
No, definitely. I think we're going to leave it there. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. I really, really appreciate you giving us your time, Mr. Logan, and I'm sure we'll be chatting to you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. We don't play with those that kill other people. I think that's the overarching message from Hassan Lorgat for me there. The hashtag Red Card Israel campaign, I think it's in full swing. And if you want to be a part of it, I think you can search the hashtag on various social media platforms. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll take the news with Zai Chadwick, Salam Media News, what you need to know, when you need to know it, and how you need to know it right after this.